Hi, my name is Beverly Little Thunder, and I am Lakota Sioux from Standing Rock, North Dakota. And I have relocated to Vermont about 15 years ago. And so this is now my home. Um, I am mother, grandmother, and a great grandmother. Um, and I was a nurse for 42 years. And now I do a lot of speaking engagements, a lot of teaching. I've gone to schools throughout my life, teaching various classes from kindergarten on up to college level. I think that the subject of this conference is very, very interesting. Women and voting. Um, Most people don't know that while Caucasian women won the vote, Native and people of color, especially women, were not allowed to vote until the 50s, the mid 50s. And I find that that is very indicative of what our country has been built on. Uh, if we look at the Constitution, we'll find that it wasn't written for Native people. It was written for the rich white men who were writing it, and it was their interests that they were trying to protect. Um, the rest of us were here to earn the wealth of those men and their families. And so when we talk about slavery being abolished, slavery was never, ever abolished. Um, it continues. It continues in different forms. For Native people, we somehow, being the first people on this continent, have been shoved down to the very lowest level. And I have to say that it's not just been government that has pushed women to the bottom. Even some of our men, our male leaders, have done so. All the while, they're talking about how women are so special and revered and the bearers of life. They are oppressing women. If you look across this state, the majority of the leaders are male. And the women tend to do their work behind the scenes and don't get acknowledged for that. Um, as a Lakota woman in this state, I feel like I've been marginalized by the leaders of some of the Abenaki tribe. Not all, but some. Um, and across the country, most of your social programs, especially in South and North Dakota, um, are spearheaded by women. It is the women who organize and uh, write for the grants and do the fundraisers to keep places like battered women's shelters open, um, treatment centers for alcohol and drugs, child care centers, medical care for women. And when you look across the last 35, 40 years, even the American Indian movement was led by men. That's what you always heard about. You heard about Dennis Banks, you heard about Russell Means, and there was a whole litany of men who were always the ones who were put out in the forefront. They're the ones that the press went to, and women were kind of ignored. Right now, there are thousands of Native women who have gone missing and who have been murdered, and we hear nothing about it. If a Native person is shot and killed by an officer, it might make the local news for one day, but then there's nothing else heard about it. Black man or woman is killed. It makes headlines and it becomes a week and a half to 2 weeks of headline news. The Pine Ridge Reservation is the poorest nation in the country. 6,000 people or so live on the Pine Ridge Reservation alone. And 90% of them live way, way below the poverty level. We have a lot to vote for. And when the last election, people were discouraged from voting in North Dakota because a law was passed that you had to have an ID showing the same address that you were registered to vote under. And that address had to be a street number. A P.O. box was not sufficient. Anyone driving through southern North Dakota on some of the roads leading to residences will find it difficult because there are no street signs. People don't have street addresses. They have post office boxes that they go to. And so at the last minute, again, it was the women who organized um, getting people into the tribal office to be assigned a street address so that they could vote. But not everybody did that. So there were a lot of votes that didn't get cast. Right now, there are people who are really, really pushing women to get out and vote. It's very important to us that the administration that we have suffered under the last 4 years change. As a Native woman, I have very little faith in the US government. We have treaties that have never been ratified. The Black Hills struggle alone has been going on now for close to 100 years. Native people never gave the Black Hills to the United States. The Black Hills took it. And it was once a part of the reservation because the Native people told the government how important the Black Hills were. Again, these treaties were negotiated primarily by the men because the white politicians who were there only wanted to speak to the men. So the Black Hills issue has been in court now for 100 years. And the US government once made an offer of a huge sum of money to buy the Black Hills, and the tribe said no. That huge sum of money should be restitution, and now we can negotiate what you can do to lease the Black Hills. But the government said, no, this money is for the Black Hills, just to buy it outright. And every one of the tribal chairs, there's 7 different communities, sent their checks back and said Black Hills are not for sale. So it went back to court and it's been in court for probably the last 35, 40 years. That, gives me very little faith in our government. When I hear about our government wanting to make treaties with other countries, I ask myself, why would another country want to make a treaty with the United States when it has such a record of not honoring its treaties? And these are the things that, as a woman, I think about, because it's not just going to affect me and the remainder of my life. It's going to affect my great grandchildren. And I was told about 10 years ago by an elder who has since passed that it was time for the women to step up. It was time for the women's voices to be heard. It was time for the women to be recognized. And as I've watched across the country, I see that coming to fruition. I see women stepping up, demanding to be a part of the process, demanding to have their voices heard. But I also see the pushback, almost like the belief that, well, a Native person, especially a woman, could do anything to make a wise decision. And quite the contrary. It is the women who make the wisest decisions. And somehow, throughout history, the misogyny that was so prevalent in the white world has permeated a lot of our Native communities. Domestic violence is a huge problem. And we all know that children that are exposed to domestic violence have a lot of problems growing up and oftentimes repeat the same behaviors when they're adults. And as women, we want to see a peaceful world. We don't want to see our women subjected to being slaves to the men in their community. We want to take our rightful places next to the men. We want the same respect given to us that we give to them. So it's a struggle and a battle that no doubt will continue. But I have faith that it's going to continue in a good way because more and more I see our youth stepping up. They're very concerned about what's going on with Mother Earth. They're very concerned about the destruction of this planet and the resources that sustain us. And they're speaking out and they're stepping out and they're demanding to be heard. And this old lady is glad to see that. I don't care how they dress. I don't care how they talk. The fact that they're voicing an opinion and showing that they care about the planet they live on is plenty for me. I think that that might be a role of some of the elders, is to support these young people. not to try to convince them that their ideas are wrong, but to listen and to congratulate them and celebrate them when their ideas bring about something great, and to hold them and encourage them when an idea falls flat. So, as women now in 2020, we need to organize ourselves to get out and vote, even though we believe in our hearts that our vote doesn't count. It may be that one vote doesn't count, but the collective is what's going to get us ahead. And that's just one step at a time. Thank you.